indicating that Americans are durable despite high debt, inflationary pressures. Retail giants like Walmart reported that consumers are sticking to essentials, though. And with the holiday season approaching, the election 11 days away, interest rates and spending trends are under close watch. This is a #1 issue for voters, especially as the Fed weighs its next move on interest rates. Let's bring in Ted Thatcher now, president of Bright Lake Wealth Management. Ted, good to have you again.
It's great to be with you.
So what do you think is driving this stronger than expected consumer sentiment despite ongoing economic pressures like high credit card debt, high prices across the board, energy, gas, food? What do you think is driving it?
At the end of the day, Alicia, the way I see it is that Americans are really tough folks at the end of the day. Yes, they've been battered by the unbelievable effects inflation has had the last several years. But at the end of the day, they are able to still go out there and, make ends meet, as difficult as it may be. I think that the Walmart report you referred to is really interesting to me, as I also had my eye really closely on those retail sales numbers. But at the end of the day, I think when I really dive into the deeper, data, despite Americans' durability, which is incredible despite the data, I think that we're all asking ourselves, how long can that last? How much sort of blood can you get out of the stone? And obviously, we have an election coming up where Americans will vote on what they really believe the state of the underlying real economy truly is.
So the holidays are also right around the corner. How might retail sales maybe affect or reflect the resilience we're seeing in the consumer behavior?
I think that in the culture we have today, for better or worse, it is at times materialistic. And we usually do see a bump, of course, around the holidays in spending. We think about Black Friday and all the sales. And ultimately, with the reports that we're seeing from especially a huge retailer like a Walmart, I do expect to still see a push around the holidays. And so how can it ultimately affect consumers? Well, we'll see how much they push into those non-essentials. It is interesting to me, despite the inflationary pressure, even this last summer, Americans traveled more than they ever had. And so if we kind of look forward a little bit, I'm interested to see if that actually holds come the turn of the year and come the holiday season.
So you think people are just going to rack up their credit card debt even more? I mean, it's at a record high right now. How much more can Americans take?
I think that that's a really good question. I do really believe there's a huge discrepancy between what's happening on Wall Street in the United States right now and what's happening on Main Street. As you noted, Americans have a huge debt load in the credit card realm and more broadly, over $1 trillion right now. And what that tells me, if you look at the other sort of savings statistics, is that most Americans not only have a lot of credit card debt, but they can't come up with $1,000 in their savings to cover an unexpected expense, which ultimately you can read into pretty quickly and realize that, hey, Americans aren't just living paycheck to paycheck, they're living credit card payment to credit card payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so can they push that a little bit further? I think that so much of what drives our society, at times the materialistic nature of it, would lead me to believe that they might try to squeeze a little bit more if they're obligated to.
I'm sure who they think is going to win the presidential election will affect how much they spend or how much they put on that credit card as well. What impact could today's data have on the Fed and another possible rate cut, which whatever they're going to do is going to happen after the election at this point?
Of course, the Fed meets right after the election. And ultimately, what's really interesting to me is because of some of the, I'll say, data that has come out around the jobs numbers, basically the unemployment rate ended up coming in lower than expected. So more Americans are employed. And then ultimately, with that combined with the latest retail sales numbers being higher than expected, and of course, sentiment figures, Americans' sentiment belief about the state of the economy came in slightly higher actually than expected this morning. All those end up meaning that it's less and less likely that Jerome Powell will continue with these significant rate decreases. And so what that tells me is, hey, we're more likely going to see a prolonged lowering of this interest rate environment, which means we're not going to get the relief as quickly, I think, as many folks would like, especially when it comes to, those folks trying to buy houses and things like that. Literally, I think it's the third week in a row, the 30-year mortgage rate has actually increased.
Ugh, okay, that's not good to hear. Ted Thatcher, president of Bright Lake Wealth Management, thanks for your insight and time today, as always.